Good afternoon, everyone. A delight to welcome you to the Engineering Theatre at Rail Live 2025. Firstly, I must very briefly say thanks so much to Pandrel, who have supported and sponsored the theatre this year, as they did last year. Fab to have their support again. It allows me to have lots of very nice, chewy, nerdy chats in here. As I say, the Policy Theatre has the very important people saying things. We kind of get to some of the solutions in this theatre, you know. So, no, it's a delight to have you both. Now, before Andy and Ben and I, Professor Andy Doherty from GCRE and Ben Ackroyd from Porterbrook, talk about the shape of testing, I think it's only right that I hand the floor over to Ben, given that a lot of people have come up to me and said, it's looking smart, Long Marston. Yeah. I thought it'd be a chat. Also, lots of people might notice there's been some digging going on, among other things. Ben, tell us what else is going on. What's happening at Long Marston? Right,
thanks, Gareth. I mean, when I say a warm welcome to Long Marston, I really do mean that. So, great to see everybody. I'm just going to take a few slides, if that's all right, just to take you through what we're doing, where we've come from, if you like, where we're at, and obviously where we're going in future, and really what that could mean for us, our fleets, our customers, and UK Rail in the wider sense. For those that haven't visited the Porterbrook tent, which is in E1, there's a virtual reality experience as well. We can actually see the test track going round, just to get a feel for what it would look like from the driver's cab. So, a little bit of a look back, really. I've got a video now which will just show you the start of our £75 million transformation at Long Marston. And it's very much a case of what it looked like when we took the facility on back in 2021. And we were actually under a leasehold at that point, and it wasn't until last year, February 2024, that we actually took on the freehold. And we'd been able to, up to that point, invest in the offices, the roads, and focus on the safety of the infrastructure that we had. But obviously it wasn't until we took on the freehold that we were really able to look bigger picture, that much longer term, and secure that additional funding from our shareholders to start to look towards the test track. So if hopefully this may work. Great, let's click on to the next. So why are we investing, I guess, so much money in a test facility? Why is Roscoe doing that? Well, one of the things that the site afforded us, in combination with having a test track, is being able to offer more of a turnkey proposition into the market. What do I mean by that? But bringing together maintenance facilities. We've got a new asset management facility over there. Obviously, lots of storage, alongside the ability to test. When we think about new fleet introduction in the UK, operators are not blessed with the capacity and the capability to really manage a sort of a fleet transformation. Perhaps bid plans in the past have assumed one in, one out, and a perfect world, and life is not perfect. So being able to act as a throttle between, vehicles coming out, units coming out of the factory, and being able to store them, shake them down, and then bring them into service, perhaps in a fuller way than have been traditionally the case. And alongside that, obviously, there's the opportunity to train technical staff, driver training, and so on. And there will be, we anticipate, not just pure electric fleets, but as we get towards diesel replacements, multi-mode trains and so on, particularly for, the likes of Northern, ScotRail, and so on, and other parts of the network that are not necessarily going to be electrified in full anytime soon. And then I guess at the heart, there's also the ability to be able to support testing through and innovation, and really act as that bridge between innovation and bringing things, propositions to the operating railway. And that notion of it being a sandpit, that's something that we see from businesses that's really encouraging the ability to be able to do things much more quickly than you would do if you didn't have facilities like this. So here's a bit of a fly forwards. Let's see if it works. So what we've got here is now an outer loop and then also an inner loop. So we'll be using the inner loop to support vehicle movements within the depot, and then an electrified outer loop that'll be able to test trains at higher speeds, anything up to 50 miles per hour. We've also installed an Ackroyd across the site, which will enable us to turn trains round, increasing the flexibility to be able to get certainly in and off the main line. You may have seen the rail charging converter that we're working with Siemens on. That's just been installed and is connected up to the 11 kV supply. Obviously, there's a huge amount of innovation that's been brought into that as part of their sort of discontinuous electrification proposition, but it's a perfect solution for us when we're talking about effectively 3.5 kilometres of electrification. It's a great way of bringing their technology towards the market and being able to demonstrate it here. And for those that are a bit more closer to the detail, that link between connecting into rudimentary industrial supplies at 11 kV and converting that into traction supply. Signalling, it'll be relatively basic, but it will be representative of what's on the main line and provision for ETCS in the future. And then plans further ahead, certainly we expect a solar field actually where we're sat here now, just to be able to support the domestic supply and potentially get that into back into the charging converter. You will have hopefully seen the additional capacity that's been installed already, just to my right and your left. And 2 of those lines are going to be electrified as well, just to support ease of access onto the test line and also to support warm store in future. And obviously we're mainline connected back over in this direction out towards Honeybourne and the branch line there. One of the things that's taken a lot of consideration and we've weaved into the project is an underpass. It's not yet built, but we will be building that in the second half of this year, and obviously that will support continuous running and certainly remove any train on vehicle risk through the level crossing risk. So that's a key addition to the scheme. Yeah. Okay. So some of the capabilities that we'll have just in terms of testing, I mean, with the, limited speed, it's not ETS, and we'll probably get into some of the discussion about what it has, what it hasn't, and what that might mean, but, it becomes very difficult to be all things to all people and very expensive too. So I think it's about, important to know what you are able to do and also what you're not able to do as well. You'll notice we've got DC trains here in the 701s, but we're not planning to install third rail and so on. But, if a site did, then the ability to be able to shake those trains down before they go into service would certainly be a massive plus point. So that's enough from me. There is a quick fly through here of what the site looked like just 2 weeks ago. I've been saying to people, just getting this site ready for Rail Live has been a bit like, refurbishing your house from top to bottom and then trying to throw a dinner party halfway through. So it's been a real mission, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. But the site's looking great, and come Monday morning we'll be back into business and getting more track laid and getting Siemens on site and installing the overhead line. So I'll just click on, and you'll perhaps just be able to see a bit of a fly through. So that's it from me.
Lovely job. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so it's a chance, a nice introduction to kind of show what's happening here. For people who've been wandering around, kind of going, well, this is a lot of digging. Now they've got a reasonably clear answer of what that picture looks like. But what's quite nice is there's a lot of sale. You're pushing really hard on the value of this as a site for testing of what it can do, and the fact that Network Rail, we've just gone through the rebrand of getting the test tracks out there. Melton and Tuxford are these. Again, sites that have these fantastic not potential, they are doing it now, of 140 mile an hour running, all these different things. Again, a different proposition to what you've got. And then, Andy, you've got what is being proposed at GCRE. And before I go to you, Andy, to talk about what's happening at GCRE and where things are at the present day, what's quite nice, we had the chat beforehand, is like, we're not, I often get asked, when I go and have these chats with people about test tracks, I'm out there pitching, like, what about GCRE? What about what Porterbrook are doing? And I'm like, none of us are competing with each other. There is absolutely the demand in the rail industry for us to be all using the different strengths of what we're proposing together to make sure that the railways are running at their most efficient and most effective for the challenges facing us. So that's quite exciting. There's clearly an energy about testing, which is kind of fun. Andy, on that energy, what's going on at GCRE? Tell us where we're at. A little bit of it for people who might not know what it is, a bit of a pitch, but also where things are.
I thought I was going to start with, so everybody's going to be disappointed because we actually recognise that we do have different challenges and there are lots of things where we're not competing, we're actually doing different things. So we're not going to have a punch-up here. You may be disappointed to learn that. There's plenty of other places you can perhaps see that, in the pub over the way. But no, GCRE, we have the advantage that we're building on, I wouldn't say a greenfield site, but it's actually a brownfield site. It's an old coal mine. And we're repurposing the coal mine to create a much larger facility, 7-kilometre loops, able to run up at 180 kph, and with an infrastructure loop to do infrastructure testing. Because after terrible events like Ladbroke Grove and Hatfield, particularly Hatfield, I found myself having to go to America to do the testing because there was no facility in the UK to do that testing. And more importantly, even if there was a facility, it would have been, the problem is you're testing at the envelope, at the outer edges of the envelope. So when you want to test and research and go into challenging the standards, understanding why things are failing, even though they are apparently complying with the standards, you need to have a capability to explore further. So we're building this large site on the top of a coal mine, when I first went up there with Arthur, I sort of said to Arthur, it would have been really helpful if there'd been a nice flat site like this site, but it's on the top of a hill, which means that actually it's very realistic to the railway because there's no line of sight on it. We will need 6 GSM-R masts to just be able to get us connectivity around the site because there's a big hill in the middle. The idea is that we can test both ways. The outer loop is for testing vehicles with a full Class A ETCS system, and the inner loop being the infrastructure loop being sort of a traditional railway with a Class B overlaid ETCS on it. And the advantage of that is you can now do the transitions between the two live. If you do a figure of 8 operation, you're stepping out and in of driver supervision to level 1 to level 2 systems all the time. And the idea is it's plug and play, so suppliers can just come along, plug in their equipment. We can, plug in and plug out different systems to test. And we bought some trains, so they were our trains, and we didn't have to negotiate, because that was a little bugbear of mine, trying to do double rate variable standard testing. Took 3 years to try and get everybody lined so we could do the testing. Get the train owner, get Network Rail, get everybody lined up to do the testing. It took a long time, but the product is a fantastic improvement to the railway's braking capabilities. The reality is that you need to have flexibility in your testing system. So one of the things that we need to talk about is how you introduce that. You can tolerate risk in a test centre in controlled environment. So our aspiration is to eliminate the human from the site, because that's the best way of making it safe, if I can put it this way. No human. So make it automatic. Keep the human away from any risk is our aspiration. It's not easy to achieve, but we're trying to, and we have the advantage that because we're building something that's rather gloriously on top of the hill with 2 meters of rainfall and a rather lot of wind at the same time, we ran an innovation event in March, and one of our biggest concerns was the weather. It wasn't like this, but it was like this. It actually turned out to be a really sunny, wonderful day. It could have been horizontal rain, and we sent everybody back drowned. It would have been very realistic to the real railway, but that's life, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that, and this is what's exciting about this particular moment is that there's for various strange reasons we've got this energy of like railway testing all of a sudden has suddenly jumped to the front. I want to step us back. Why do we need these facilities at all? We have a fantastic railway out there that we could be using for test. No, the challenge we've got is that we have a railway that is absolutely jam-packed. We already don't have enough track access to maintain the current timetable, let alone the timetables that are coming. So to do all the testing, whether it's testing for innovation, testing for new vehicles, just getting new fleets, or even
Sweating the
modified
asset.
fleets running, you name it, whether it's shakedowns, whether it's fast running, all of that needs space to be allowed to run and also to be allowed to fail in an environment where it doesn't piss anyone off too much.
Because we're not good enough. We need to do better.
And absolutely, and this is where we've got the chance, and this is part of the importance of the challenge of the existing test tracks we have, is that we're ensuring that we have a lot of experience in doing this. The challenge we've had is that we've taken perhaps we've done a fantastic job with trains, but we haven't looked at the biggest, you used the word sandpit, that lovely sandbox idea. I love the sandbox idea. The whole railway system, and this is what you've got here, the abilities here. GCRE absolutely is being led on that. In fact, the fact that you've almost started with an infrastructure side rather than a train testing side gives you that angle. And of course, we've got the ability to run at high speeds. We've got the big regional railway up at Tuxford that you can basically do with it as you please. We've got this capacity that gives the mainline railway the ability to get on with doing what the mainline railway needs to do, right? Which is run timetable trains to move people and things around. But there is a challenge, right? And the challenge test tracks have been living this for a while, is the unending challenge of getting that all to work at the same time as living the pressures of the existing railway, whether it's funding, whether it's the busyness, whether it's the boom and bust of rolling stock. So, Ben, from your perspective, you've kind of had an output-led, the need for the testing track here, the need for your loop here has kind of in a way been led by the fact that there is a bottleneck. Yep. Tell us a little bit about where it came upon. You reached the point of, we need this. This is why we need this.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to some extent as a competitive differentiator as well. That new, particularly if you look at the new build piece, and we are a rolling stock company, that is at the core of our business, is leasing trains and supporting the introduction of new fleets. I think we are encouraged to go further as well. And if you think about recent new build introductions and just how difficult they've been as well, and the cost that's been associated with getting them into traffic, that cost has been ultimately absorbed by the manufacturers, by the taxpayer, and so on. So being able to make that job of introducing trains that much easier at a lower cost ultimately is going to benefit everybody. Now, don't get me wrong. Initially, when we were on site, and we've had trains on at Long Marston for many years, but because this was just a storage facility, somewhere to store trains, we will have a fleet of our own that will be coming off lease very shortly, that we'll be planning to get back out on lease in the shortest order possible. And being able to offer the new operator a train that has been looked after, is no doubt being refurbished, possibly reconfigured, etc., and then it works because we're able to demonstrate that it does work out of the box because we've shaken it down here, is much more valuable. And we can commercialise that, if you like. So there is a hard commercial output in terms of, from Porterbrook's perspective, what this now means in terms of our proposition into the rolling stock market in particular.
So this is where I have to I'm hosting the panel hat off and put my test tracks hat on and say, one of the key challenges we've got as an industry, right, is that government loves to throw, millions of pounds at innovation, but it's not hugely interested in what happens after it's thrown its lovely money at the innovation project, and then the pipeline to and one of the things, crucially, I'll say that word, to implementation, is that one of the things we don't have a shortage of innovation in our rail industry. I would argue that the rail industry is an unbelievably and fantastically innovative space. It's just that a lot of that innovation doesn't quite then land and run and end up being implemented, and that's where testing facilities like all of ours, it's not mine, it's all of ours, Network Rail test tracks are all of ours, but those testing facilities have the ability to get that innovation to stick, and that's the crucial thing. And it's not just about the physical bits, it's about the knowledge ecosystem of having the people, you have experience in rolling stock and getting rolling stock moving, and you also you have SMEs who come in who have presence on here. Chrysalis are here. You've got lots of other. It's not just Porterbrook. GCRE is being a hub for lots of railway organisations and entities to have a presence. We also are, through our suppliers, providing that connectivity between those knowledge spaces to get new things, but also existing ideas and improved ideas out on track. And kind of that's it's exciting, but also it is, as we say, an unending challenge with some of those pressures. Andy, you're itching to say something. Go on.
I am, yeah. I mean, the railway industry is quite good at innovation, but then we've talked about the valley of death over the years, and sometimes even two valleys of death, and not managing to call it actually the Grand Canyon, really, because actually the other end of it is the high TRL application. So you have a great idea, but you've got to prove it, certify it, and actually bring it into service, which means training people and getting yourself ready. When you buy the washing machine, it actually comes with an operating manual. It actually, and if the process is working, you're actually getting trained people to be able to come and service it. That doesn't work with heat pumps, by the way. If you've owned a heat pump, try and get it serviced. That's just a little thing of life. I've had one for 10 years, and it's interesting. But the reality is that's where we've got to go. So our innovation event that we had in March, we had 12 companies doing 12 full-scale demonstrators. 3 of those companies have now moved on to contracts and are moving to implementation. And that is 1 out of 4 is actually a really good hit rate.
This is a really key point I'd like to pick up on. Before I forget it, I want to just latch onto it. It isn't about innovation, even in the sense that the innovation might well have been done. One of the challenges isn't even things like network rail product approval, whatever. It's actually, you can even get beyond that. It's demonstrating to those who are going to use it how it works, why it's a good idea, why they should invest, and how the whole life in terms of training,
and how to maintain it, and how to operate it, and what spares you will need, and everything that goes down the chain. Because if you look at the future, what's our future? The reality is we will be expected to perform better and better. We'll be competing with the green transport industry. That is not sitting still, it is moving forward. We have to move forward with that. So our trains are going to get more digital, the whole infrastructure is going to get digital. You heard about Mona talking about her systems. We introduced the track management systems a few years ago. So that's complexity. On the other side, we're expected to sweat the asset more. We're expected to get more tonnage out of the system, where, frankly, we need to be cheaper in how we do things, and deliver better performance for people. How will we do that? And actually doing what we're doing isn't good enough. It's got to move forward. So you can see now, no car manufacturer puts his car into service without 1 million kilometres on it and thoroughly testing it. Our friends in SNCF have just mandated all new fleets have got to have 1 million kilometres before they go into service, because what happens when you put the first train in service, you have a sort of naughty habit of the doors falling off, sort of as an example. The reality is you can't test on the main line and open and close the doors because you don't know whether anybody got on the train, So, but the reality is one of the biggest operations of a train, opening and closing the doors. And you have to do it in the rain, in the sunshine, in the storms and everything else. Do you do that on a sort of out of service train on the public railway? No, you don't. But you do it on a test track. Those are the sort of things that we've got to do more of. We've got to do more of the digital proving. We've got to do more of how do we get more out of the assets? How do we get more tonnage out of the track? How do we achieve more for less? And to do that, you have to have knowledge. You have to know how it fails, what are the things that stop it doing that, and changing them, improving them, taking technology further, and at the same time finding a way to be more sustainable, and doing that for a lower carbon budget, if you want to call it that.
Okay, we're all mates up here, happy days. What if we're not competing, or rather, if we aren't competing with each other, who are we competing with? This is where I want to talk about the global market, right? Is that one of the things we sometimes forget is that whilst we don't perhaps learn lessons from Europe, we and our close neighbours in terms of some railway things like electrification, actually we are extremely good at a huge number of things on our railway, sweating the asset being probably the one at the top of the list. We are extremely good at that, squeezing bigger and bigger trains on smaller and smaller infrastructure. We're pretty good at these things. With the testing facilities we have, what can we offer to make sure that trains aren't going to Velm or Wildenrath, that they're staying here for our domestic market, but beyond that, what can we offer our friends over in the continent? And possibly this is, Andy, where you can do more than we can in terms of them bringing their trains to us and testing them here as well. Ben, I'll come back to you, Andy, but sticking with the global market point, what is it that you have identified, firstly, in terms of what doesn't need to go to Velm or Wildenrath, and also beyond that, what we can offer the European, if not the global market?
Yeah, I mean, so that point around not being all things to all people, I think the there may still need to be the case to send trains abroad if we haven't got that capability, and this won't have the capability to do everything that let's say a new train requires. So it could be effectively a blended approach.
That's where we come in.
You know, and like I say, you know, if you think about the ETCS market, and that is that is an international market that is challenging. I mean, you know, we've got our trains on at Riddick already, and so on, and we will continue to do. You know, but if we in the UK start to really expand that, and you know, the quantum of trains that need to be converted and installed and tested and so on, if there's a capacity demand, you know, that might be something therefore to consider, and likewise, you know, on the continent too. So I think you know, whether we'll see you know, manufacturers and vehicles from the continent coming to the UK is one thing, but there may clearly be other systems, exactly, other solutions, other problems that need to be solved, where it could play its part. And you know, it's been quite interesting as well, actually, to see at the show here today. I think I've certainly noticed that there's been some, you know, European businesses here looking to sell into the UK. So interesting point. Yeah,
there always is. You know, TransLink were here as well earlier. So, you know, our close neighbours are always interested, particularly what's happening here at Rail Live. So whilst Ben and I might not be able to offer a loading gauge solution that Europe can make much use of, as you say, the other systems, we can do pretty much everything else. Andy, you potentially have the benefit to offer, let's say, quite literally the bigger,
we will be offering
bigger option for them.
European GB ABC gauges for European train testing as well, so we can potentially go there. We've allowed the functionality to mean that we can take on 15 kV, 16 2/3 DC as well. In the future, we're not trying to do that first time because you've got to walk before you can run. But one of the things you've got to sort of also remember is, we've increased our loading gauge, how much we squeeze through what is a small tube, but the reality is we're still at 25 tonnes. Most of Europe is at 22 tonnes. And in fact, technically, we're exceptional at 25. It's 22.4. But the reality is, if you look at TTCI in Pueblo, when they were created 40 years ago, the first challenge was, tell us how to get to 30 tonnes. Tell us how to get the tonnage up. Do you know what? Today, their challenge is, how do we get to 38 tonnes? That's what they're currently testing. They've gone from 25 to 30, 30 to 33, 33 to 35, and now they're looking at 38. Why can't we do the same? Is gravity different in the UK to other places? No, I don't think so. But we do sometimes think it is. You know, so we should be challenging the envelope, trying to find how we can go further. We should be trying to find ways of further improving the envelope. The discontinuous electrification. Do we need to electrify every single bit of kilometre of mileage of, you know, to split the metaphors along the way? Or is it actually 1 mile out of the station either side that makes a huge difference and the battery can do the rest? Because the duty of the battery will be tremendously reduced by that sort of process. We need to test those things. We need to find a way of validating it, because the thing that test centres need to move from is testing something for Network Rail, for Transport for London, for everybody to say, well, that's a nice idea. We'll try out on a branch line somewhere. We need to move to the bit where it's just do it. You've tested it, you've proved it, do it. Stop this process of another 5 to 10 years of talking about things.
Say, Andy,
I was trying to keep my words sensible. But the reality is we don't just do it. We don't prove it and do it. We have to talk about it.
There's been an emerging theme throughout, partly because I always steer conversations that way, about storytelling and about the importance of our industry doing a better job of telling our story, not necessarily to the politicians, although that's very important, but also to the public, to the general public. There is a massive opportunity for us to tell that positive story about how we're tackling these challenges. And as you say, you mentioned the other market, you know, EV market, for example, how we tackle that head on to the public. It feels like we have the opportunity to do that in a really quite exciting way at our facilities.
And properly structured engineering testing,
scientific
testing that actually evidences the answer to stop this debate and move to the do it bit. Because then we will move forward. Then we will move forward fast, because we've been talking about it for too long. I'm getting too old to just carry on talking about it. We've just got to do it.
Talking of talking rather than doing, more talking, questions. Anyone got any questions out there? Stunned silence. Shove your hand nice and high in the air. Oh, go on, there's a question at the back. There's a microphone coming to you.
Hi there, Neil Whiteman, Network Rail, Track Engineering Manager for Stoneblowers. We currently have a new fleet getting built at the moment in the States, and we've been looking for places to test, and we were finding that cost was an issue for us. We're having to look at the heritage sector to try and find places to test, because we can help them with some maintenance whilst we're doing some testing, and we found that Network Rail were cost prohibitive to us.
Oh, that's painfully probably one for me to start with. It's definitely been a challenge that we have. It can be quite difficult to understand the level of granularity to provide the right costs to the right kind of testing solutions. That's definitely been a challenge. There's also been a perception, certainly for us, and it'd be interested to see what you've had in terms of people being interested about what you can do. Perception of being full and entirely, having everything completely booked out, and therefore it's a bit of a challenge to come in and bring options, solutions, ideas, things to be tested at test tracks. What I'd say is watch this space, because we understand that way of working isn't, we have to be much more modular, much more, let's say, flexible on how that looks, depending on what people's need is. And the other thing, of course, is, and we've had conversations with yourselves about this and need to have conversations with yourselves about this, ultimately what we're providing is value to the UK, to us, by having a better railway. And that doesn't always mean that we explicitly would be charging, come and test your thing here, we will take money from you for it. If there is a demonstration of direct value to the rail industry, particularly as we move into a GBR world, then there are, let's say, alternative ways of us ensuring that we can still wash our face whilst providing that value. So from our perspective, watch that space. But I know for charging regimes, I get to be a bit more open about that because, we're a public sector. Yeah. But you might be a bit more defensive of it, but ultimately you don't want to charge people off, do you? You want people to come to
the facilities, it is difficult to get it, I know from the from the ETCS projects that we've got and so on. It is, but that's great, isn't it? We built the asset management facility, or refurbished it, installed pits and so on. We didn't have any customers at that point, but lo and behold, since we've built it, it's been full.
People need it, don't they? This is the thing. People are desperate for it.
I think the demand is there. I mean, when it comes down to pricing, from our perspective, we've had shareholders that have invested in this site, so we've got to make that pay back commercially and so on. But at something that, it's like anything else, at a rate that the market will take. And there'll be a variety of customers. We're already speaking to, we've already had manufacturers. Using that asset management facility, already in discussions with the OEMs and so on. So, there will be some bigger ticket projects like that. There'll be some smaller projects that we work with on a much more micro basis, if you like, and so on. So I think we will be. We're here to support the industry and make the introduction of innovation work. And so I think. We're not at the stage where we say, here's a pricing schedule like I know you've got on the internet.
Yeah, you can just download that PDF and just reduce by 5%, right? Yeah.
What's charged. So, I think, as I say, we've got to make it pay back for our shareholders, and therefore, but at rates that the market will stomach.
But there's two types of pricing, you see. There's the pricing that says, yes, this is so much per hour or so much per day or whatever, but it's almost how many days. So if you're going to take 6 months to get through product approval, getting yourself actually the test onto the track, getting results, and then the whole process has got to be quicker. The whole process has got to be quicker because then the rate, even if it's the same rate,
yeah, absolutely.
But if somebody tests twice as fast, then actually that's half the cost. So there's two types of costs in here. So moving faster, doing it swiftly, keeping your overheads down. We recognise we have to have a pricing schedule as well. Kelly is busy working on such a thing now. We are actually doing some testing now on our what we call the RRV line. So we have a rail vehicle test line that's 400 metres. It's got all the cants and curves and gradients that you would ever require on it. It's even half electrified. And when I finish with Noel Dolphin, it'll be fully electrified. And we're going to move our trains up it, because you've just got to think about how to move things forward and offer that to the market.
I think one of the key things is that, firstly, be reassured, we are having these, we are all having conversations. Yeah. There is a demand out there across the board for railways in GB, also over in Ireland, Northern Ireland as well, and in Europe, to be using various elements of that. We are keen collectively to make sure we deliver. We all have different strengths, and we're keen to deliver that collectively to make sure everyone's getting what they need to make sure we're running a better railway. So, yeah, absolutely watch this space on that front. Anyone else with a question? Shove your hand nice and high. Yes, question over there.
Hello, Natalie Pickett, Head of Procurement, Keolis Semi-Docklands. We are running DLR, Manchester Metrolink and Nottingham trams. Do you have plans to build testing facilities for weird and wonderful trains like DLR, or only these big and boring ones?
Well, we've got third and fourth rails, so we've got the potential to do suburban and urban rail systems. DLR obviously has DLR's got its fun with its signalling system, but yeah, we have the ability to kind of run pretty much anything. We can create that regime, which is quite good. I dare say you guys both have the same flexibility. If you get a project that looks interesting, you can facilitate it, right? Yeah,
that's exactly the situation. Basically, even for Irish railways, it's different gauge, 5'3". Well, basically, if they said they wanted to bring 2 fleets over, then you can justify it. You can't justify it for one train, but clearly, if there's a market and there's an opportunity, then you can fit the DC system into it. There is a cost for that, but right now we've built our system such that all the sleepers are actually pre-drilled. All the systems are capable of taking it, the bonding and the isolations. We're designing it for that, because if you try and do that later, it costs you a fortune to modify all that stuff. So make provision now. So one of the biggest challenges we find is there's a crystal ball on the table there, and we're trying to work out what the railway is in 10 years' time and what facilities it will need. And we're polishing vigorously the crystal ball to know what they are, talking to the suppliers and obviously people who have knowledge of that as well, such that we can provide a facility that is capable of that. And as you will be too.
It's been my last 6 months, hightailing up and down the country doing precisely that, yeah.
So, the reality is we're trying to take every opportunity, design in every capability. Can we do everything? No, of course we can't. But, between us we can probably do everything. But the reality is, give us your problem and we'll solve it. Come and knock on the door. We're here afterwards. We'll talk about it. We have an open day on the 15th of July. You're welcome to come along, to come and see the site. Bit of mountaineering at the same time. We try and guarantee that everybody comes back. If the weather's okay, we'll probably get them back all right. But, it's a challenge. It is interesting. But the reality is, it is a challenge to create the facility that is useful for the railway for the future.
There's a point that's worth picking up, which is the advantage we have in having railway systems that are just that, a system. I always like the analogy for the Apollo program. They realised that the only way they could test such an immensely hyper-complex system as the Saturn V with an Apollo spacecraft on the top was what they called all-up testing. Because there are too many relationships to split out and do nice scientific, just look at this bit, just look at this bit. The advantage we have is we have a railway system that has it's got ETCS, it's got, Siemens are testing out their new stuff as well to get we've got all manner of different bits and pieces, GCRE will too. All-up testing is the benefit we bring over some of the other options that you might see being offered. We can do that all-up testing, and you can test the complex system that is a railway. Any other questions? I've gone and go for it. There's a microphone on its way, Andrew.
Hello, Andy Elms, currently unemployed, but never mind. Is there a role for test tracks in the training of staff, both for operation of rolling stock and permanent way?
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the big flaws of testing today. It doesn't include the training. You really need to test to train people such they're ready for the new product, new system. The maintenance people have got to be ready for it. The operation people have got to be ready for it. That has got to be part of the offering, because that is the thing that somehow kills a lot of projects.
Yeah, when it comes to infrastructure, the challenge often is that the route are unwilling to accept it because they're nervous about the implications of, well, is this just an extra thing we have to train our already overstretched teams on? well, providing an overall solution of that new, as you say, Andy, that overall picture of, well, it's a new solution, but it gives you this whole life cost saving, and here is, we will provide you the training facilities centrally. You know, think about Network Rail's current route structure. We can do that centrally. You'll have a central team, and then that can be rolled out route-wise as the number of assets grows and grows. Certainly, we've been providing training facilities. You know, Tuxford, one of our sites, is already a signed-off certified training facility. Network Rail spending a huge amount of money on training facilities that aren't in our estate, and you don't need to. Come find us. We have so many facilities that we can offer for training, all manner of things, and watch this space for some of the new facilities we're building as well. So certainly from our side, training is, actually, interestingly, the most conversations I've had with Network Rail, as probably one of our key stakeholders, given test tracks are our Network Rails, is about training more than testing, actually. We've got these skills that we need to give some people. We would like to do that at your facility, please. Absolutely, yes. But I dare say the same, you know, Ben, for yourselves. I know it's not a thing you've actively factored in, but actually, I've seen the facilities. They're fab. You have been thinking about it. It's been on one side of your head, right?
Yeah, it has, yeah. I mean, I did kind of signpost it in the presentation earlier, but yeah, I mean, bringing in any form of new technology, new solutions, and so on, training has to go. So and the ability to be able to sort of immerse people in that as well, and apply innovative ways to doing that, I think is a real opportunity. So, yeah, something we're looking at, and you know, even down to the real basics as well around driver training as well. You know, the ability to be able to get hands-on trains, practical handling earlier off the railway. You know, think about that in terms of the potential that has got to support driver training and reducing the training times for getting drivers productive. Could be a big win.
Key thing about test tracks is that they are railways. They are railways. They have P-way. They have foundations. They have drainage. And these things need maintaining. And what better way to train or indeed to try out novel ways of installing, maintaining, managing than doing it on the test tracks where the people, you know, you can manage those relationships with the other customers, let's put it that way, should something require a pause. So yeah, absolutely yes on that front. Any other questions before I kind of round up? The last thing I wanted to talk about was GBR, right? We have an opportunity with GBR. Well, maybe we do, maybe we don't. I'm interested to throw it to you. We've talked about the fact the railway is a system, but we're going to have the benefit of a rail industry that will start looking more like actually respecting the fact the railway is a system as well. What do you see the opportunity? Do you see it as an opportunity? Do you see GBR as an opportunity to do better at that? I look at, obviously, Porterbrook, you might have a slightly different view, being standing and seeing GBR happening over there. But yeah, Andy, we'll start with you. What do you think about GBR? Do you think it's going to make any difference to you at GCRE? Do you think it's going to help?
Well, we're not.
Do you hope?
Better not talk about the elephant in the room about how long that might take to come about. But,
Yeah.
but you're absolutely right. You know, having run various system interface committees for 20 years and trying to bring the industry to talk to each other to get the train and the track to interface in a way that was economically beneficial for both parties has been a fight, you know, and we have achieved it in some areas, and we've made good benefit out of that. You look at how trains are track friendly, they get better access charge, you know, those sort of things have happened, but they're isolated examples. Actually, the challenge is now we can look at the whole thing and integrate the whole thing. And the best way to do that is to say, okay, so we have these problems, and we can pick off the top 10, and GBR, can you please pick the top 10 interface issues between all the actors, put them on the table, and then we'll work out between us how we can knock them off. And the test track should be able to take 8 out of the 10, give a solution in 6 months, and get on with it.
Yep.
Otherwise, we'll be talking about it in 10 years' time.
100%.
And that's going to be boring.
Yep, definitely. Ben, I think one of the things that is, so from your perspective, you having this integration happening, you're looking at, one of the things I found quite interesting with Porterbrook, and probably quite visibly more than the other Roscoes actually, is, yes, you are still a Roscoe, that's your core business, but actually you are taking a much more broader systemic look at the overall railway picture, whether it's yourself directly as a business or working very, very closely with the likes of Siemens. So that feels quite positive. Is that, I take it that's a conscious decision to sort of take that slightly more systemic view, and that fits nice with the GBR picture as well, right?
It does. I mean, we are taking a much more integrated approach. You know, last year we took 49% on in Brodie Engineering up in Scotland, and David's sort of now spearheading up on behalf of Porterbrook, which is great. And so we are, I think, going back to the GBR point, bringing track and train together is undoubtedly a sensible sort of systematic approach. I think what has to ground, in my opinion, the focal point has got to be around growth, you know, supporting modal shifts, growth, and so on, which in turn, you know, yes, provides a capacity crunch and so on, which is where, you know, opportunities for testing and so on, test facilities really start to come into their own. But you know, it's that focus on getting into growth, because that's what will stimulate then the investment into the railway, and so on, because, you know, these are, whatever we're dealing in, whether it be in infrastructure and trains, these are long-term assets and so on. So they need long-term views, big sums of capital involved. But to support that, it's got to be the absolute focus on driving growth, which we all know is there to be had.
Yeah. A really nice way to. It's not. I'm very glad you mentioned modal shift, because I think 2 slides away on my slide deck over there, flicking over in the test tracks tent. Yeah, I've hogged it. It's ours. Is a point saying that the GB Rail needs to double its passenger and freight capacity by 2040 at the latest to meet the UK's own net zero targets. That target, whether government likes it or not, set in legal stone. And as Ben and Andy have said, and as I very much want to say, we're here to help facilitate that. So, chaps, just a really good conversation. Thank you so much. Please say thanks to these two. Yeah, thanks, both. That was really good. Thank you so much for joining. I mean, I have another session with Poggy shortly afterwards. Please come and join that. These chaps, I'm sure, will be about for a few minutes for any further questions you have. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much. Cheers.